I think my family would probably make mention that when I was probably 10 years old over summer breaks, I just got in my mind that I needed to learn a lot over summer and do a lot of things. So I would write down a list of goals or I'd type it out because my handwriting is atrocious. I should be a doctor. I typed it out, printed it out, and put it on my door in the bedroom. And so my goal over the summer would always be like, okay, I need to learn this skill. I want to do this much of anything and kind of sort of check it off over summer. Standard, 10-year-old stuff. And so I've kind of kept that going over the years. I'm probably too busy. And I'm sure a lot of listeners go, I'm busy too. And it's true. We're all busy in different ways.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Inner Wealth, the Forbes Ignite podcast. I'm your host, Nicole Cacal, CEO of Forbes Ignite. And every week I'll be sharing with you my conversations with unique, creative, and innovative people across all different industries. These are people who are intellectually curious explorers who are also redefining what it means to be successful today. From personal to professional, we cover it all to understand what drives our guests to blaze their own trails and create nimble solutions within the industries that touch each of our lives. Our guest today is Julian Gluck, a U.S. Air Force pilot, nonprofit leader, and Forbes 30 Under 30 list maker. I've gotten to know Julian over the years, and I was so excited to speak with him because he's not only so accomplished in his career, but he's the epitome of a lifelong learner who is always striving to improve himself. We talk about his extensive travels, the values that influence his decisions on an everyday basis, and so much more. Because Julian is still active duty, I'm required to include this disclaimer. The views expressed on this podcast are those of the speakers and do not reflect the official policy or position of the United States Air Force, Department of Defense, or United States government. I know you're gonna love what Julian has to say. Here's our chat. Hey, Julian, how's it going? Thank you so much for being here.
Nicole, thanks for having me on. This is great.
So we were just talking right before we hit the record button, and I was thinking, where in the world is Julian today? Because I've been following your journey. You're never in the same place in any given week. So where do we find you today, Julian?
So today you find me in the beautiful Hampton Roads area of Southern Virginia. So I recently moved here. I'm stationed at Langley Air Force Base, or Joint Base Langley Eustis as it's also known. And it's phenomenal. We've got places like Virginia Beach, Norfolk, Newport News, and where I'm currently recording in historic Williamsburg, Virginia.
Amazing. I have yet to learn all the different areas there, but I'm sure it's a lot.
I'm still learning as well.
So tell me, what have you been up to lately?
Well, I recently changed positions in the Air Force. So I promoted to major at the end of last year.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you very much. I went from serving as the aide-de-camp to the commander, or basically the first or primary military assistant, to 3-star general in charge of 7th Air Force, which is United States Air Force's Korea. I was out at Osan Air Base in the city of Pyeongtaek in Gyeonggi-do province in the Republic of Korea. And after finishing my 1-year tour there, I was restationed to where I am at now, serving as the Chief of Mission Sustainment for Air Combat Command and the Director of Staff for A3A, one of our divisions in the directorate here, the A3 Directorate. Besides my military work, I am running a couple boards of directors for nonprofit organizations, principally serving as the sort of Chief Innovation Officer, the Deputy Chair for Innovation, and a trustee for the Dedalian Foundation, which is a nonprofit founded by World War I pilots after the war and has become sort of the premier military aviator fraternal organization. And in addition to that, I'm serving with the Spots Association, which is dedicated to providing scholarships and serving as a community for recipients of the Spots Award, which is like the Eagle Scout of the Civil Air Patrol, a cadet program for Air Force cadets. So doing some writing on the side, some speaking, and trying to find a great place to live here in Virginia while I'm stationed here.
Wow. Well, it is such an honor to have you on the podcast. And thank you for carving out the time because you sound very, very busy.
I know you're busy as well, and I'm happy to help.
So tell us about your story. You have a very, very interesting and amazing background. So what was your personal and professional journey to where you are today?
So I was born in West Palm Beach, Florida, My father's a pilot and previously military and has served a lot in defense and deployed numerous times overseas. My mom is an occupational therapist. And due to my dad's flying jobs, we travel all around. So when people ask, where are you from? What's your home state or town? I go, oh, here's the litany: Florida, Tennessee, Maryland, South Carolina, Georgia, Colorado, Texas, Louisiana, a little bit of Qatar and Guam.
Wow.
Korea, and now Virginia. So I've got to live in some very diverse places. And after growing up for middle school and high school in Georgia, I was doing some acting. I co-starred in a public broadcasting TV show, sort of Degrassi-esque, but a lot of edutainment on the technical college system in Georgia. And I played the class president. It's amusing to say the least. But when that finished and I was looking at, well, I really want to go into the armed forces. There's a long history of that in my family. I had also started a business when I was 14 doing sort of international e-commerce and sports. And after all these, I knew I wanted to join the military. So I applied to the United States Air Force Academy, was nominated by Senator Saxby Chambliss, and joined the class of 2012 at USAFA. Went through my 4 years at the academy, majoring in poli-sci with a Japanese minor and getting really involved with nonprofit work at that time, especially with the Knights of Columbus, serving as their college chairman for their international program. When I graduated, I went off to the Eisenhower Center for Space and Defense Studies. And when I mean off, I went about 15 feet away from another one office in the poli-sci department to the next while waiting for pilot training. And I did a little bit of studying astropolitique, did a couple trips to Japan for language programs, and then went to Euro-NATO Joint Jet Pilot Training, which is a multinational military aviation program in Wichita Falls, Texas at Shepherd Air Force Base. I flew the T-6 Texan II and the T-38C Talon, getting to fly supersonic, do aerobatics. It was a lot of fun, but definitely the most challenging year of my life as far as the going from education to this very tactile, physical task management saturating program at high velocity. I graduated from there and was selected to become a bomber pilot and started my bomber formal training unit, went from co-pilot to aircraft commander to instructor pilot over the years. And during that time, did 2 deployments, one to the Middle East and one in the Indo-Pacific region. After that, off to Korea, serving as the aide. And now here in Virginia, during that time, finding lots of fun ways to give back to communities and get involved in different volunteer programs, and very grateful for a lot of the ways that I've learned from others, from wonderful mentors, to grow as a leader and to give back in a myriad of different disciplines.
That's amazing. So I get that the busyness wasn't something that's recent. It's been a common theme throughout your life. So kudos to you. You've accomplished so much in such a short amount of time. And speaking of mentors that you mentioned, what inspired you and who are some of your role models throughout your career?
I would be remiss if I didn't mention my family. Not only because my mom is probably going to listen to this later. She already told me she would be, but because I'm really grateful and feel blessed to have grown up with 2 loving parents. I've got an awesome younger brother, and they definitely instilled in me the importance of giving back, kind of the immigrant story, but a century back for my family, and escaping from poverty and poor situations in Europe to come to the US to find better lives. And the military was a home for many people in my family to really get their start and give back to the country. My family has really made that part of our core identity and continuing to give back. My parents love to volunteer in different ways and help out. That's something I've taken with me. So I look to them as role models. There's so many people I've met through the military, nonprofit work, the Forbes network, and I don't mean to be a sycophant at all, but you as well, like through Forbes Ignite as a partner here. There's so many fantastic people through these networks I can learn from every day as peers. And when I was kind of thinking on this, a name that comes to mind is when I was in Colorado Springs, when I was a cadet, my first year, senior year, as we call it, I went to an Ethiopian restaurant in Colorado Springs called Uchenna, because one of my favorite things to do is try new restaurants. I'm a huge foodie, a gourmand, whichever, whether it's a 3-star Michelin or a food truck in the middle of nowhere. I love it. So I always want to try Ethiopian food. And I went in, and there was this woman who was serving as the chef for the restaurant. And she just had this aura of kindness. And there was a picture with all of these children framed on one of the tables, like the counter in there. And I asked her about it, and she said that they were all Ethiopian refugees that were adopted by families in Colorado Springs. And I was like, that's so amazing. And how do I get involved? So I asked her, what can I do? I'm a cadet, but I've got some time. I'd love to help. So I got to meet with these wonderful kids over the course of my senior year, and then going into when I was on what we call casual status, waiting for pilot training when I was at the Eisenhower Center. And we did everything from hanging out with the kids and doing coloring and learning a little bit of Amharic with them, which unfortunately I can't remember any of now, one of the primary languages of Ethiopia, and even bringing them horseback riding on base and playing games with them, introducing them to cadets. And it was so great. And Chef Maya Hetman of Uchenna is just this wonderful, like wholesome figure. And when I think about what she does for others in her free time and the kindness that she brings to her customers as a chef, that really impacted me as a cadet and a very young officer in the Air Force. And I'm grateful for meeting many people who have that same devotion to others that Chef Maya does.
I love that. I love that story. That's extremely impactful, and you find inspiration from anywhere. So what are some of the values that have contributed to your volunteerism?
Well, values are definitely something I've thought about for a long time. My family, we are really interested in the idea of history and legacy and what we can do to shape the future in a positive way. I was thinking back to our ancestors who had to struggle so much, and now we're in better opportunities to do more. And especially with the military heritage, we thought about what sort of a rallying cry, a motto, like a primary value that means the most to us. And after going through hundreds and hundreds of Latin phrases, because we're like, oh, we got to go with Latin. Half the family's Italian American. We went with audentes fortuna juvat, or fortune favors the bold, because that fortune, not in a monetary sense, but in a sort of life sense, the good things will happen when you're courageous. With that, we figured out 8 values that we think are the most meaningful to us as a family. And perhaps I'm the only one who's like really meditating on this all the time, but on my iPhone calendar, I have a virtue for the week that automatically rotates for each one starting on Sunday. And those 8 virtues or values are prudentia, meaning courage, salubritas, health and fitness, pietas, duty, comitas, friendliness, veritas, honesty and integrity, humanitas, culture, industria, diligence and productivity, and prudentia, wisdom and sagacity. And those aren't exact definitions, but going from the Latin to the English. If there's any Latin scholars listening in, I'm trying my best, but that's not one of my strongest language backgrounds. So those are values that I think about when I'm doing my decision making or considering what's really important to me.
I love that. That's so important to have those values that really define every decision you make on an everyday basis. So it's words to live by, essentially.
For sure.
And so you travel really extensively for work, but you also immerse yourself in local communities and their culture whenever you have the chance. So tell us about a time that you learned about a culture that ultimately changed your perspective.
Wow. There's so many of them. When I was living in Qatar for Operations Inherent Resolve and Freedom Sentinel, my crew and I, we would travel all around Doha and just try all the different Middle Eastern foods. When I was living in Guam for the continuous bomber presence, I just really immersed myself in the island culture there in the Marianas with the Chamorro people. And it was fantastic getting to see this territory of the United States and the beautiful beaches. I mean, what a wonderful spot. In addition to the international travel, I would say the culture you find at home in the different places you live is so huge. So I spent about 6 years total living in Louisiana in Shreveport. When I was there, I learned a lot more, immersing myself in the culture of the state derived from the Cajun and the Creole cultures. And it was so beautiful. Like the festivals, we would have a mud bug festival where everyone would eat crawfish together. And I got really into that. And you get really quick over time peeling apart the crawfish and you just stand around, perhaps imbibe a few adult beverages and enjoy each other's company. Boudin as well, lots of unique foods. I love Boudin. And listening to jazz music or Zydeco and Bloody Marys. It's so great. And seeing the communities rally together as well when there were times of trouble, particularly hurricanes. So I can remember we had a hurricane come through when I was serving as flight commander. And I told my airmen and my leadership, like, hey, I'm an emergency first responder on the side. I've done my rescue diver training. I want to help out if something happens. And I learned about the Cajun Navy, this group of folks in Louisiana who get together and they help out during emergencies with disaster relief and recovery, whether it's taking boats into remote places to pull people out or doing health and readiness checks or triage. So I signed up with them and I was in my house bearing down when the hurricane came, and it was thankfully not as destructive as we thought it was going to be. I think casualties were extremely low for the area. And finally, I got the call. And when I'm ready to spring into action, I had my first aid kit that was totally Gucci'd out with everything probably beyond my skill set in there. And I was ready to rock and roll. And they said, hey, you got to go to this village probably an hour away. So I got in my car and it's still pretty heavy rain and there's huge pockets of water. And I finally get there and I'm ready to just do triage on folks. Like, okay, who's missing a limb? I got a tourniquet here. I'm ready to rock and roll. And this guy's like, hey man, a tree fell on my garage. Like, all right, let's do this thing. And something that has stuck with me from my childhood. And this is probably not statistically accurate, but my father, when we were working in the yard one day when I was a kid, was using a chainsaw on a tree. And he said something to the effect of, chainsaws are really dangerous. It's the number one thing which injures pilots. I feel like he was exaggerating a bit. It was hyperbolic, but I swear within a couple of minutes of him saying that, the handle fell off his Husqvarna and almost landed on his leg.
Oh my God.
This is nothing against the Husqvarna company. It was just, maybe it was an old chainsaw or something, but he saw him jump back and I went, noted. I am not losing a leg or an arm from a chainsaw. And then anytime I've cut trees, including doing some tree chopping with the Knights of Columbus when I was at the Air Force Academy up in the Rocky Mountains to help out this very remote area. Even you can find these old photos of me posing with an axe, with like my sleeves cut off, trying to be cool. I just will only use an axe. I won't use a chainsaw. So when I responded back, they go, hey man, you got a chainsaw? I was like, no, I'll be right back. And I went and found a store, bought an axe, and then spent probably the next 10 to 12 hours.
Wow.
I went to 4 houses and I just chopped limbs and trees that had fallen in people's yards, and seeing different people from the community from very different jobs and parts of life come together to rally around each other was amazing. And with that, besides the local culture, I'm so interested in foreign cultures and language and regional expertise, especially as a Japanese speaker. I try to find Japanese speakers to work on my language skill. And in Shreveport, Louisiana, there weren't a whole lot of folks who spoke Japanese, but I had a fantastic barber. She was from Okinawa, and we would just jibber jabber in Japanese. And I'm sure all the other customers were really confused by our conversations. And a local lady as well who owned a very, very small Japanese grocery. And I would just sit down with her for an hour and then buy some like unagi eel at the end, like thank her for her time. So I really enjoy wherever I travel, getting to experience new areas. And I know it'll be the same in Hampton Roads.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's such an amazing story. And it's also very important to note the culture that is at home that we tend to overlook sometimes. So I'm really glad that you called that out. So on top of all of the amazing work that you're doing, you're also a prolific writer. What are some of the topics that you're most interested in, and what publications are you most proud of?
I got into writing back in college at first. Besides, you had to take your tests and do your classes, but I wrote an article on military simulation for a boutique magazine and really put it down for a long time. And the opportunities opened up over the past few years to start getting into some academic writing. And my big thing with that, no matter what the topic is I try to make it engaging and interesting, a lot more prose and interesting rhetoric so that someone would want to open it up. Right now, the subject matters I'm mostly writing about involve defense and the Indo-Pacific region.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to continually branch out because I'm interested more at this point in my life in breadth over depth as far as writing. That includes, I've got an interest in agricultural technology and advanced energy, particularly. And overall, everything is with an interest in leadership and innovation, the things that I want to take with me throughout the military, public service, industry, the nonprofit sectors. How do we innovate and improve organizations and make the world a better place? My first peer-reviewed published article was called Opening the Door to Cultural Understanding and Mutual Cooperation, Multinational Military Partnerships and Educational Outreach. It's more than a title. It's like a whole paragraph. I've learned a little bit since then to shorten it. That was for the Journal of Indo-Pacific Affairs. And it was about how we can work with partner nations through defense and how our understanding of language, regional expertise, and culture can improve your ability to work with allied partners, which is crucial through exercises to help out in defense. So that was for the Journal of Indo-Pacific Affairs, writing it with my good friend Byron Muhlenberg, who's another Japanese speaker in the Language Enabled Airmen program with me. My next one was The Gray Legion, Information Warfare Within Our Gates. This was written with my good buddy Jeff Baptist, who is sort of an expert on disinformation and misinformation. And we wrote this for the Journal of Strategic Security. It's all about the Russian disinformation campaign and what we can do to help combat the disinformation and misinformation that we see through social media. And it's a very complicated problem with a lot of really brilliant people working on it right now, who I've had the opportunity to learn from as someone who's got a very nascent interest in this field as a journeyman. But a good part of that one, you can tell with the Gray Legion as sort of a macabre Roman extended metaphor throughout it. That's rhetoric that I try to introduce to my pieces. The last article I just wrote is called Casa Obake, a spirited case against abandoning the U.S.-Japan nuclear umbrella. This is in On the Horizon, Volume 4. I wrote it as part of the Center for Strategic International Studies Nuclear Scholars Initiative. The article is about the extended deterrence that the United States provides to Japan through our nuclear weapons, in case Japan or many of our allies with whom we have these extended deterrence guarantees can be protected from any sort of adversarial actions that would go up to the nuclear level. And this is something which I originally came up with because I was reading about the nuclear umbrellas, and particularly the one in Japan, and I reminded me of a Casa Obake that I had read about a long time ago. What that is it is a figure, a sort of monster or ghost, if you will, from Japanese folklore. And the story is that if you abandon an umbrella, if you're sort of careless or you leave it somewhere, a poltergeist can take over the parasol and it becomes sort of a ghoulish bother to you. And they're depicted in the artwork from hundreds of years ago with like really goofy giant cyclops eyes, big tongues, and they're wearing traditional sandals. It's just a hilarious image. And so I went, has anyone ever written connecting the nuclear umbrella and the Casa Obake? And when I searched everywhere, it didn't exist yet. I went, yes, now I have to figure out what I'm going to write about involving this. So the article talks about different ways that the nuclear umbrella could go. And my big goal with it was to help coin terminology based on how a patron with a client, the person with the umbrella and the person under the umbrella, could make the umbrella cover more people, could throw it away. And so coining that terminology using this metaphor of the umbrella. So that was my big thing with it. And through all my writing, I try to make it amusing and put little like inside jokes or allusions or references and see if I can slip them past the editor Hopefully no one from the wonderful Pacific Forum is listening right now. No, I actually do hope they're listening, because I'll put some stuff in my next article, which is tentatively titled Korea as Janus, Rewards and Risks for the ROC-U.S. Alliance with Russia. And this is part of the Pacific Forum's Republic of Korea, United States Next Generation Leaders Initiative, working with 4 other scholars from the United States and 5 from South Korea as we figure out different interesting themes to write about for how the alliance between the Republic of Korea and the United States is the linchpin for a free and open Indo-Pacific region. Mine particularly is using the metaphor of the Roman deity Janus, who had 2 faces, one on opposite sides of his skull, to look toward both the United States and toward Russia. The United States for ethics and as a security partner, Russia, which up until the most recent conflict had been a trading partner with South Korea, sort of a resources for technologies partner, and how perhaps the Republic of Korea, United States dyad and the Republic of Korea, Russia dyad can be brought closer together for communication in the future that would perhaps help the region be more free. A lot of variables right now with the invasion of Ukraine, and it's certainly an evolving situation there to see how this is going to go about, let's say, in a post-Putin regime. So a lot of possibilities for the future and a lot of late nights writing ahead.
No, it's really fascinating, all of the different topics that you're interested in. And it all really dovetails in with your nonprofit work as well. It all really goes hand in hand with what you're doing. So what are some of the initiatives that you're most proud of?
The biggest initiative I can think of was really part of a team rather than something that I was part of individually. So what I'm most proud of in life as far as initiatives or any efforts in general were the 6 months that I was deployed with the 96th Expeditionary Bomb Squadron to Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. During that deployment for Operations Inherent Resolve and Freedom Sentinel, I was part of an incredible crew of dedicated aviators. We had Breaker, Ramrod, Roulette, Archer, and then me, and my Air Force call sign is Cosmo. And the 5 of us were thick as thieves, and our missions during that time included serving in the liberation of the cities of Mosul and Al-Raqqa. And throughout our time in Iraq and Syria, as well as a mission in Afghanistan fighting the Taliban, we were fully involved, everything we'd been trained for. It felt like what I wanted to do as a child had finally come into fruition, whether it was flying our missions and then bonding over wonderful food in Doha. And during that time, in addition to being a part of this incredible multinational mission in the war fighting ISIS, I also found opportunities in my off time in between the missions to try to give back. And that included joining some folks in helping our third country nationals, primarily from the Philippines and Nepal, working at our base to provide some basic goods, because a lot of the folks who came to the bases or to countries for work as migrants, they do so much to send money back home to their families and live in very challenging circumstances. And when I found out about a lot of the folks in these straits that were really just giving it all up to take care of their folks back home, I also noticed that there were care packages that were being discarded, that folks and their churches were sending to service members overseas, but with a lot of goods that we couldn't really use there. I mean, from food, when we had some great dining facilities with the mess halls, up to like baby formula, which obviously the service members don't need overseas, and people are just throwing it out. So I looked into what we can do with these supplies, and working with our chaplain corps and looking into the community, I found a way to help bring these supplies to a lot of the folks who had come to Qatar for work and give it to them. And that meant a lot to me, that combination of serving in the war and in combat through our combat missions to sort of the winning hearts and minds in the total part of the war and helping those domestically and locally. And I try to take that wherever I am. And then these days, since I'm no longer doing deployments at this time in a staff job, I'm looking at ways that I can make a national, international strategic impact through volunteer work. So a couple of the big projects with the Spots Association, we are building a national mentoring program for recipients of the Spots Award, that top Civil Air Patrol award, who are looking to be matched up with mentors from perhaps career fields they're interested in, so that they can get to that next step. Many of them are in college or getting ready to go to school or join the military. And whether they're in very rural areas or urban areas, and they can't find those sort of strategic mentors with a lot of executive experience in their job fields, we're building this out. And the next one that I'm doing is working on a transformation of the Dedalian Foundation so that we can better honor the legacy of our World War I aviators and create a strong core identity with young military aviators and the next generation of pilots and navigators and flight surgeons through our scholarship programs that we do for cadets and midshipmen in college. So these are sort of the projects I'm working on right now, trying to bring innovation and new ideas to these marquee legacy organizations to help them grow.
That is really incredible. And it's so inspirational. So thank you so much for everything that you do.
Thank you.
I ask this question to every single person on my podcast. How would you define success?
Success for me is making the most positive impact I can with the most number of people, whether that's a huge impact with a few people or a little positive impact with a ton of people. That's sort of my goal. Whether I'm a commander or it's through interpersonal communication, I want the person to come on the other side of our friendship, our professional relationship, feeling like he or she has gotten to a better place in life. Maybe they're happier, maybe they learned something, maybe they've grown. And because I know through all my interactions with leaders, with subordinates, with peers, with volunteers, I'm growing as a person and I'm learning and becoming hopefully a better person along the way. So that's how I look at success, helping the most people in the biggest way I can.
Amazing definition. I couldn't have said that better myself. It has been such a pleasure speaking with you. And thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
Nicole, it's been a blast. Thanks for having me on. And in the same room as so many other wonderful speakers you've had on here, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
That's it for this week's episode of Inner Wealth. I hope you enjoyed our conversation and that you'll join us next week as we continue to explore all the ways success is being redefined in our ever-changing world. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast on your favorite podcast app, and follow us on Instagram at Forbes Ignite for more thought-provoking content and opportunities to engage with us. I'm your host, Nicole Cacal. Thanks for joining us.